Now, today, remember, is day 2 of the truce, and a new wave of hostage release by Hamas and Israel is of course, expected to take place tonight. The timing of when the swap would happen has not been released yet. Remember, yesterday, by this time, the prisoners had been released, the captives and the hostages had been released, but today is day 2, it still has not happened so far. Now, this, of course, is happening after the first swap happened between Israel and Hamas on Friday. As the latest update on the ground, Egypt has received a list of 14 hostages that Hamas will be releasing any moment now. Israel has already received the details about the same. Both the parties are releasing hostages and prisoners in the ratio of 1:3. Earlier on Friday morning, the Gaza truce had come into effect after hectic negotiations between Israel and Hamas that were mediated by Qatar, and this was followed by the hostage-prisoner swap on Friday evening. Hamas released a total of 24 hostages, not just the 13 Israeli hostages, but also 10 Thai nationals and 1 Filipino national.
We are very happy to see that they are back home, and we can't wait to see others come back as well.
Now, according to Israel, among the Israeli hostages who've been released, there are 4 children and 6 elderly women. The youngest is just 2 years old, Aviv Asher. While the eldest is 85-year-old Yafe Adar. 75-year-old Hanan Kadzir, whom the Palestinian Islamic Jihad reported had been killed, however, has been found alive and was one of the women who has been released.
אני שמח שקיבלתי בחזרה את משפחתי. מותר לשמוח ומותר להזיל דמעה. זה דבר אנושי. אבל אני לא חוגג, אני לא אחגוג, עד אשר לא יחזור אחרון החטופים.
The Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to bring back all the hostages after the release of the first batch. Hamas still at this moment has well over 200 hostages. Now remember, it also had resulted in the deaths of 1,200 Israelis at the time the 7th of October attack happened. The truce, which has brought a pause in fighting and more delivery of aid into Gaza, could be extended for every additional release of 10 hostages beyond the figure of 50 that has been agreed upon, the temporary ceasefire, which could be extended by 1 more day. Right, now to give us more perspective in terms of how this humanitarian pause, of course, is playing out, and will this be extended, and can it, of course, result in a long-term ceasefire? We're being joined by Mr. Joachim Bitterlich, who's joining us live from Berlin. He is a former German ambassador to NATO and has also been a former advisor to the former German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Now, Mr. Bitterlich, we are at a pretty important stage in this war. There is a humanitarian ceasefire that is presently underway. Today is, of course, day 2 of it. Hostages are being exchanged for prisoners. Do you think this is something that will continue, and do you think this could result in a long-term ceasefire?
I'm not yet sure. It's difficult to make any prognostic at this very moment, because we are in an encouraging phase, but at the same time, a phase with high risks. Because on the one hand, the Israeli government will be more under high pressure to continue till the liberation of the last hostage. On the other hand, Hamas, a terrorist organization, is becoming step by step, let's call it, a new authority in the rest of Palestine, in Cisjordanland. And they want to get the end of Israel. It's not anyone who wants to have a compromise with Israel. And therefore, the whole situation is, let's call it, is extremely dangerous. It's encouraging to see the first hostages liberated, especially children and women. But at the same time, well, we are coming towards a situation where the question will be, will Israel continue this? Or is the pressure as high to be obliged to continue, or will they stop it? Because if you take what has been negotiated up till now, this means maximum 10 days, maximum perhaps 150, around 150 hostages, not more. What to do with the others? Extremely difficult to see. The hope for me is that Hamas should be pushed for releasing all the hostages.
Absolutely indeed. And also because you've been a former ambassador to NATO, I think it's an important question that needs to be pondered upon. Now, we saw some pretty interesting scenes yesterday where the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and also the Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, they were at the Rafah border crossing. And what the Spanish Prime Minister said was very interesting. He said, it is important that this short-term ceasefire leads to a long-term ceasefire. He also said something interesting where he said that the European Union should now deliberate seriously upon recognizing the state of Palestine. And he said if European Union does not come to a consensus on that, Spain can take its own decision. As someone who's followed German politics very closely and indeed European politics very closely, what do you think, what do you make of this statement by the Spanish Prime Minister?
It's interesting because the next one who will go into the region will be the German president, Steinmeier. He will go on Sunday for 2 days to Israel in a sort of solidarity with it, and he will continue to go to Qatar in order to thank the Qataris for their assistance up till now. But you are right. The question is how the Europeans will be able to leave what I call a non-policy period with regard to the Middle East. For me, the most shocking till today is why we have left aside during 20 years the whole question of a two-state solution in the Middle East with all the consequences. Why? The same applies to the Americans, it's true. By the way, Joe Biden has formulated yesterday in the sense of a continuing ceasefire, yes. And therefore, it's an interesting period to see this. But what's the best solution? Because you have on the Palestinian side a weak authority. Any recognition will change anything, question mark? Or would this strengthen only Hamas?
Right.
This is the danger. And Hamas is the organization who wants to, let's say, to end with Israel at the end.
Right.
Therefore, it's an extremely, let's say, difficult period.
Absolutely. And also, we need to just point out to our viewers that we are getting live images from the Rafah border crossing. Remember, the exchange of hostages for prisoners has not so far happened, but we expect it to happen any moment now. And these are live images we get given to understand of the images that are unfolding at this moment from the West Bank. At the and these are those Israeli police jeeps that you have there, and these are images from the West Bank, and we expect the Palestinian prisoners will of course be allowed to walk free. A total of 14 Israeli hostages are expected to be set free today, and the ratio of prisoners will be released from the Palestinians for the Palestinians is 1:3, and therefore we expect about 42 Palestinians to also be set free. Ambassador Bertolik, if I can come back to you while we also play these images for our viewers on the screens. There are American nationals who are also at this moment held hostage by Hamas. But what has happened so far is that not on day one nor on day two do we expect any American hostages to be released. But the United States of America diplomatically has been very involved in the crisis that is unfolding at this moment in the Gaza Strip. Are you surprised that the Americans have not managed to secure even one hostage so far in this crisis?
But please be aware that the first hostages released in the beginning
the first
were
two, yes,
two Israeli Americans, citizens. Yesterday, for example, we had 4 German Israeli citizens among the 13 Israelis released. And I think this will continue now with others with double nationality. And I don't see any, let's say, provocative gesture towards the Americans there. I don't see it.
You don't see that coming in?
The Americans again among them. But the whole problem will be to know who are exactly the hostages. Because yesterday we had this surprise that an elder Israeli woman was crossing, and the Israelis were extremely astonished because they had assumed that she had been killed
Absolutely.
at the end. And therefore, there are certain, what I call many uncertainties still going on, and I don't see any, let's call it, open gesture against the Americans in this field. But Hamas knows how to play with this. This is the other side. It was easy for them to begin with 4 German Israelis. Yes, I think others should be the French Israelis. The surprise were the 10 Thais, where Thailand or, let's say, Iran, we don't know exactly, who has been really negotiating, were in the lists, they are suddenly in the list, and there will be Americans, I'm sure, on this. But it's in the Hamas interest, let's say, to raise a bit a certain tension, to raise the pressure on the Western world, let's say, to exercise the same pressure on Israel.
Absolutely. I think that's of course a crucial point. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Joachim Bitterlake, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Okay. Good luck. Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.